What is up, friends? Rob here, and I'm back with a brand new Spitting Fire Leadership podcast for all of you today. And I'm with my man all the way in Texas, Mr. Landon Galloway. Landon, will you say what's up to everyone real quickly?
Man, I am so happy to be here, Rob, and thank you for having me on. It's going to be a lot of fun today.
I totally agree. I know you're going to spit some serious fire, but before we dive into in the South, they call it the meat and taters. I'm from California, but that's what they call it here in the South. Before we dive into that today, as always, I want to just encourage you to please subscribe to the channel, right? Like, comment, share this with someone who needs to hear this. I believe that there's going to be some fresh wind shared today. And here's why I do this, because I believe that God has created all of you on purpose for a purpose. And there's a leader inside all of you. And I pray that something that Landon shares with us today will do more than motivate us, but will divinely inspire us to go, you know what? It's about time that I start living on purpose and making a difference in the lives of other people for the glory of God. So Landon, once again, I'm so excited that you're with me today. I've been looking forward to this. And what I always like to do as we kick this thing off is just get a 30,000 foot view of your story, maybe a little bit of your background, kind of some of that transition time up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So Rob, my hometown is where you currently live, Tupelo, Mississippi. So I grew up in Mississippi, lived in Tupelo for a long time. I did my master's degree at Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. So I went away for a little while, came back to Tupelo for a short season, and then got the call to Grace Church here in the Houston area. So I've been here for almost 5 years now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. But I wear a couple of different hats. I lead an organization called Destiny Leadership Institute. We are a training program that partners with local churches to help them develop and train their leaders, help churches run their own internship programs, accredited courses that a local church can offer. So I oversee all that. And I'm also on the pastoral staff at Grace Church. We're a multi-site church. I oversee our location in Tomball, which is in the northwestern corner of Houston, as well as oversee our internship programs at Grace and help develop and write a lot of the sermon content that's spoken at all of our campuses. So got a lot going on. I'm also, just because that's not enough, right? I'm also finishing up my dissertation in New Testament. So I will have a PhD in New Testament within the next year or so. So a lot of writing, a lot of communicating, wear a lot of different hats. Have a beautiful wife and 2 little girls. My wife, Sarada, and then Vanna is 6 and Zara is 5. So life is fun and just really enjoying the season of life that I'm in right now. God's been good to us.
Man, that is so awesome. So just a couple of things I want to dissect there. As a pastor, what do you believe has been one of the top, if not the top, leadership lesson that God has taught you through season of, whether it's been a campus pastor or some other type of pastor? What leadership principle, trait, characteristic rises to the top?
I really think it's one principle that always comes to mind is the idea of people over process. Okay. I'm a pretty systematic thinker. I'm a strategic thinker. I'm a planner. Everything in my life is pretty organized. So this was a new journey for me. So just to back us up a little bit further, I really did not feel, a lot of people feel this call to pastoral ministry, like they know they're called to be a pastor. I never really felt that. Like I knew that I wanted to do something for God. And I went through a rebellious season as a teenager. You were probably present for some of that, Rob. So I kind of went through a season where I wasn't sure. And then whenever I really gave my heart to God, I settled on academics. Like I've always been academically inclined. So I went and did my master's, and I thought I'd work in the academic field in the teaching space. And then I kept making, just getting more involved in local church ministry. So I started working for Destiny and doing the Leadership Institute, and we're setting up these programs in churches. And then I started getting more invitations to speak, and found that there was a calling there, and there was something there. And then I got the call from my pastor now in Houston, who's like, "Hey, I want you to come." And so everything that I've done hasn't really been like this, just like divine sense of like, I know I want to do this in my bones. It's been God kind of cracking the door open and then getting me to agree to something. And then it's almost like a bait and switch. I don't want to accuse God of that,
Right.
but he just kind of keeps pulling me further out of my comfort zone into his purpose for my life. So with that being said, the processes are something that comes natural to me. The study comes natural to me. The preaching comes natural to me. Dealing with the needs of people have been something that I've really had to learn. And I've had to learn to love people. So something that I always will remember, I have a mentor in my life. His name is Bishop Ron Lyles. And right before I took the pastorate position, we were at a conference together, and he came to me and said, "The Lord just told me to tell you this, and I don't know what it means." He said, and he didn't know that I had just agreed to come and take this position. He said, you've been at school for a long time to learn to love the Bible. God is about to send you to school to learn to love people.
Man.
And what I love about this is that I've learned it over process. I love to preach, but I love my people that I get to preach to more than I love the content that I'm preaching. So what I've learned is people over process. I know a lot of your people that are watching this are in the business space, in the insurance space, or other places. But just keeping that in mind, that it really is about honoring the people. And if you honor, you got to have good processes. But if you love the people, then things are generally going to work out well for you.
Bro, you're spitting some fire right out of the gate, man. I was taking notes while you were talking. Just want to dissect a few things. So let's start with the people. Sure. Let's just say someone's out there, whether they're in a business space. I mean, there's some pastors and church planners that watch this as well, because that's the space I come out of as well. Right. What is one just practical tip? I mean, we can make it super spiritual, but let's just make it practical that you've learned that's helped you love the people. Do you mind sharing that and being that honest about it?
Yeah, something practical. So, I mean, look, we've been through a very difficult season, and I don't know if other guests have communicated this, but as a pastor, as a leader, it's been difficult with all the polarization, with all the opinions on vaccines and masks, and then of course we all have our own opinions on that. And so the church that I serve in, we're a pretty diverse congregation. We've got people all over the map on all these issues. And then you throw in the 2020 election cycle, and that didn't help things. So what I had to learn was to rise above personal preferences and feelings and love people where they are, and seek to be a peacemaker, and realize that I may not win every argument or even need to try to win every argument, but just to love people where they are, wherever they stand, and to stand up for, to be a uniter and not a divider. Sure. And, so that's something that just to love them where they are is something that
Man, I'm ready for you to call the altar call, man. We could end right there, brother. And this being from Tupelo, our office here, you'll hear the train go through. It's just one of the, almost every interview I do now, I get the train. You probably don't miss the train going through town 50 times a day. So let me go to another thing you said, because I interviewed another pastor, former pastor, church planner. He's now evangelist and travels the country. And we were just talking about this. And one thing I have found common in whether they're faith-based leaders as church planners or whatever the case may be, or in the secular business world, is this false notion that people think God's just going to give you the whole blueprint. Right. And this as one who studied the Bible. I think of Hebrews 11, and I brought this up in this other interview where we see this, and I'm going to speak a little Christianese for all those watching today, but we call it the Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11. And what I love about the story of Abraham is God called Abraham, and the Bible said he just got up and went, and he didn't even know where he was going. Yeah. And I think a lot of times people think God's just going to give you this blueprint, this map, but you have found in your life, and would love you to speak into this, and as well as myself and other leaders, that a lot of times God just gives you that next step only. And the breakthrough is on the other side of just taking that next step. Can you expound on that for your own personal life and maybe some advice you'd give to others out there, maybe looking for that calling in their life?
Yeah. So when it comes to the call of God, there's a general call and a specific call. So the general call, if you are a Christian, you're watching this, is to go into all the world and make disciples.
Sure.
There are a lot of things that we're called to do. We're called to live at peace with one another. We're called to share the good news. We're called to walk in the fruit of the Spirit. There's just a lot of things that we're called to do that don't require a specific this. So we have to be careful here, because we do live in a Western culture.
Sure.
There's a lot about self-actualization.
Sure.
And finding myself and being the best version of me.
Sure.
And there is some truth that God equips us and has gifted each of us uniquely and individually to accomplish a particular purpose. There's some truth there, but we can overdo that a little bit and think that like life is all about us finding our sweet spot or finding our place of happiness.
Sure.
And really, it's about fulfilling the purpose of God.
Sure.
So when I think about the call of God, I think the best thing that I can do isn't to ask God, what do you want me to do? Is to ask God, what are you doing and how can I be part of it? And it's a subtle shift, but it takes the focus off of me and my fulfillment. And the focus now is on God and the fulfillment of his purposes and how I can play a role in that. And what's beautiful is that if I'm fulfilling his will, then I'll feel fulfilled. But if I'm pursuing my own happiness, usually I miss his purposes and I miss my own happiness as well. So I would say it's hard. It may be harder to be outside of the will of God than we think. And here's what I mean. Where was Jonah called to go? You know the story well, I'm sure.
Nineveh. Yeah.
Nineveh. What did Jonah do? He went the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Where did he end up? Nineveh. Right. It would have been a whole lot easier for him to go there the first time. That would have been a lot simpler of a process. He did the wrong thing. He went left when he should have went right. Okay. However, he still ended up at the destination. So I think sometimes when we begin to obsess over the will of God and the call of God, and should I take this job? Should I marry this person? Should I go to school here? Should I? And we are really upset and worried about it. But as long as our heart is in the right place and we're just trying to accomplish the purpose of God on earth, we can make mistakes. We can make wrong decisions. We can live below our means for a while, and still ultimately end up where God wants us to live. So I would just say, take the pressure off of yourself and do the next right thing. And then along the way, you'll end up where you're going to end up. And if you take the pressure off of yourself, you're going to enjoy the journey a lot more.
Yeah. No, and I just want to stop and look in the camera real quickly and say, for all those watch this, is that you need to go back and rewind this and listen to that again. Yeah. Because I think so many people miss that. They put all this pressure on themselves. And I truly believe this, and tell me if you disagree, Landon, but I truly believe that the grace of God allows us to fail forward, right? That so many people are scared to take that next step. But the reality is, even if it's a bad next step, God has enough grace to cover that. And he doesn't stop loving you just because you took maybe a wrong step or two. And like you said, ultimately, you're going to wind up back where he wants you anyways. And speaking of fulfillment, and one of my favorite quotes, and I quoted this in one of my previous, and it's been one of my favorite by John Piper, is that God is most glorified us when we are most satisfied in him. Mm-hmm. And it's wired in our DNA, man, that we will not find ultimate fulfillment and happiness unless we're living on mission, purpose for him in such a way that makes an impact in the lives of other people. And so I love that you bring that up, because I think so many people are chasing a lesser love or a lesser fulfillment or a generic fulfillment in success, in money. And there's nothing wrong with all those things. It's when those things have you, right? And then you don't find that ultimate success. But have you seen it in your own life that even if you made a misstep, there was enough grace to help you fail forward?
Oh, absolutely. I think my whole story is failing forward and trying things and it not working and making mistakes, but yet still seeing God work through it. And I'm just glad. I've done a lot of things wrong, but I think one thing that I've done right is I've always kept my switch flipped to yes when it comes to God and his purposes. So even if I didn't think that I could do something and God was calling me to do it, or an opportunity arose, and I put a lot of weight and stock into people that have mentored me and that I look up to, my pastors and leaders. And if they saw a gift in me and said, you'd be good at doing this, even if I didn't feel like I could do it, I would say yes. And so I've always felt like I've been leading in positions and places, sometimes one step beyond my current capacity, and I had to grow into it. I felt like Saul's armor sometimes, where I was wearing a mantle or a cloak or had a responsibility that was a little bit bigger than me, and I had to grow into it.
Sure.
And that means there's a lot of failure, but God in his grace has always managed to help me fail forward. So I love how you phrase that. Yeah.
And I want to stick here, man, dude. I have like 20 pages of notes here, man. We could do this for 2 hours, but I want to respect your time. But tell me a little bit about mentorship, because I'm a really big advocate of finding a mentor. How important has mentorship been to your overall, and I'll just use the word success because there are business people that watch this, but you understand what I'm saying, that's helped you get to where you're at today. How important has that mentorship element been?
Oh, it's been very important. I often tell a story of whenever I was 19 years old, just kind of figuring out my faith journey, I ended up interning with Dr. Phil Brassfield, who is the director of Destiny Ministries. Through that relationship, I started working with him. And after I finished seminary, he called and asked me to come back and to help him build out what is now Destiny Leadership Institute. So I came in and I built that out. Serving him for those couple of years was so awesome, but then it became my path forward in ministry. And if we follow this down the line, we had a core of students in Trinidad and Tobago, and so I went down there for that, and that's where I met my wife.
Wow.
A few years later, Dr. Brassfield is friends with my pastor here in Houston, Pastor Scott Jones. They needed someone to come to Houston and be on this team, and he made that connection with me. So I look back and realize that really everything in my life that has come from these mentoring relationships, the people who have opened the door for me, have provided opportunities for me. And I'm a blessed man. My dad pastors a great church in Tupelo, and he's been a mentor and leader in my life. I have Dr. Brassfield. I have my pastor here, Pastor Scott Jones. And I know these names don't mean a lot to all of your listeners, but it's just that these are the people that when I look at what I've been able to accomplish, success is a funny word for those of us in ministry, right?
Right.
But if we look at it, so much of where I am today has more to do with the relationships that I've established than the gifts that I have. And that it seems like what God is doing or does is that he elevates us at the level of relationship rather than it's not pure giftedness. It's not, is connecting with the people that God puts in your path. So I would really encourage everyone to find a mentor. The weight is normally on the mentee to find the mentor. The mentor is someone that you want to emulate or to model your life after. They're probably successful. They're probably busy. So they're not sitting around thinking like, I wonder how I could spend my time today. Like they've got to fill up their time already. So it's more about you pursuing that relationship and finding people who are where you want to be. But more than that, people that just love you and people that really do want the best for you and that They know you. My pastor often says that we need people that know us and can know us. And can tell us no. And they know us, and that's we all need people like that in our lives.
Sure. And if you don't mind sharing, whether it was your dad, Dr. Philip Brassfield, or your current pastor, is there one maybe moment in one of those relationships that rises to the top where you go, this was a defining moment for me, like this was an aha moment that helped me become the leader I am today?
Oh man. Yeah, there are several.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dr. Brassfield, just one memory that always comes up is whenever I was a fairly young communicator, asked me to preach at our annual conference, which is a very large attendance. Pastors and leaders, significant churches from all over the U.S. come.
Sure.
And he gave me a night session, and what that meant to me, like it's not about stage. I'm still, like, honestly, I'm a pretty introverted guy. I would much rather be doing this, what I'm doing, like behind a computer screen with my books behind me. Like this is much. So it's never been about needing the spotlight or needing the stage. But in that moment, the amount of belief he put in me was so much beyond how much I believed in myself. And so having someone who believes so much in me, that shifted my mentality, and I began to see myself differently because someone else saw me differently. And now the weirdest thing happened, Rob. Like I look around and I'm no longer the young guy at the table anymore. Like there's a generation coming up behind me. And I always keep that in mind, is that I can see things in other people that they can't see in themselves yet. And that's why God's put us together. And so my job now is to say, hey, this is a very gifted leader. I need to let them know what their potential is. So that was a defining moment for me. The fact that someone would believe in me beyond what I believed, what I saw myself.
Yeah. And I think that's a very interesting story, because that's what I tell people, that I believe one of the big characteristics or top characteristics of a leader is to be able to see that person where they could be, not just where they're at. Right. And you know this, discipling young people. I'm 47, so I'm a little older than you. But, I've spent 20 years really pouring into people's lives and saying, I see you here. Right. And for the sake of not getting overly spiritual in this interview and speaking too much Christianese here, but I just believe it's a divine gift that God gives people. And I believe every leader, or every top leader that I have been across personally, it's mentored me, or if I've mentored someone and had the opportunity to do that, they see you where they could be, not maybe in all the muck, the mess, the lack of maturity and all those things. So that's a very powerful story. And you said something about communication. You said something early on about helping design sermon content. Obviously, that's you're speaking my lingo there as well, because I love developing sermons and sermon content. What do you think makes a great communicator? And I'm not just talking about in speaking, like in the pastorship, but what have you seen in your experience that makes a great communicator that really reaches people?
One word: authenticity. Just to be who you really are and be comfortable in your own shoes. People can spot fake from a mile away.
Sure.
And this is something else I had to grow into. I'm a little more of a cerebral thinker.
Sure.
But I grew up in a Pentecostal tradition where the preaching was very emotional.
Right.
And now I feel like I haven't abandoned the pathos, the passion of preaching. I still have that, but my mind works differently than a lot of the models that I saw that went before me. And what I realized is that the moment that I stopped trying to communicate like they communicated, but just communicated the way that my mind works and the way that God has gifted me, I saw an increase in effectiveness. So I would say authenticity is the biggest thing. And with all communication, if I can take us back to Aristotle for just a second, for all the communicators out there, even in Aristotle talked with this, the ethos, the logos, and the pathos. So whether you're making a sales call or preaching a sermon, these three things are necessary to persuade your audience to adopt the whatever you want them to adopt. If you're preaching, you're trying to change their mind about a subject or change the behavior.
Sure.
If you're on a sales call or giving a class where you're trying to get people to realize the need for your product or your service, the ethos is who you are. Like people, they need to know who you are. So you start with a funny story about yourself. Self-deprecating humor is fantastic, but they need to know why they need to listen to you. It's your ethos. Then the pathos is your passion. There's got to be an emotive thing about it. To me, there's no greater sin than boring preaching. Like
agreed. Yeah.
To avoid that. I know we're trying to stray from some of the Christianese, but like this is the greatest message. It's the most important piece of information that anyone could ever have. That Jesus Christ was dead and now he's alive and our sins have been paid for. And so to make that boring is just sinful. So, but whatever you're selling or whatever you're trying to convince people, there's got to be a passionate element. They've got to know you believe it. Then there's the logos, which is the actual content of what you have to say. It can't all be all hype and all passion. Yeah. You've got to have something worth saying. So you've got to be, the ethos is you've got to be the right kind of person. You've got to make sure that you're an authority in their eyes. Sure. The pathos, you've got to believe it. It's got to be conveyed persuasively. Then the logos, you need to make sure you have something worth saying.
Sure. No, I think that's great information, and a lot of people, and this in the space that you're in, is I teach a lot of people, even as sermons. My wife would tell you this. I mean, I rehearsed on Saturdays, even up to Saturdays sometimes. I wanted to be good at my craft. I wanted to learn how to speak good. I wanted to learn how to communicate well. And passion and natural communication comes natural to me. But the academic side was a little bit more of a challenge because I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum, right, where I'm more of the emotional, let's. And God really had to teach me the academic side to ground, you know what I mean? Because just all passion with no substance is dangerous, right? It's a very dangerous, especially in the pulpit, as you know. So, thank you for sharing that. As the director of Destiny, let me ask you this. What has been one leadership trait that maybe you've learned during your time with Destiny that you've really leaned into and that you lead from? Is there one trait or principle that rises to the top?
A trait or a principle? You're asking really good questions, Rob. I think it all goes back to how do I want to say it? Taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
That's good.
So a lot of what I do is teaching. Is helping leaders develop in biblical studies, theology, and practical ministry. But for me to be able to be effective in that role, then I've got to stay. I can't stop learning. I can't stop. I can't stop getting the information that I need. And I think what happens is that many people, they reach a place where they're comfortable and then they get stagnant. But I'm not a very good teacher if I'm not taking in information, if I'm not constantly being taught. So I think one thing that I've learned is that I schedule reading and writing, and if we can even include things like prayer, where like that's on my calendar, just like appointments are on my calendar. Because if I'm not taking in, then I'm really not really that good at giving out. And what can be harmful in leadership is that many of the things that are visible aren't all that important.
Sure.
But many things that are invisible or under the surface are very important. And here's what I mean. So if I don't show up on a Wednesday night Bible study, people are going to notice, right?
Yeah.
Like that's they're going to be like, hey, he's normally here and he's not here. What happened?
Sure.
If I neglect to pray, it's going to take a long time for someone to notice.
Yeah.
And so whenever you wear a couple of different hats like I do, and I think all of us in this, we just live in a world that's just always demanding our attention.
Right.
It's so easy, to use the language of Stephen Covey, to neglect the important for the sake of the urgent. But but we're always doing something. And because we're always doing something, the really important foundational things are neglected, and that catches up with you time and time again. And we keep reading of spiritual leaders falling and all the scandals. And it's just because we've not taken care of ourselves first and then taking care of our families first. So that's a principle that I really believe in is if I have anything to give, it's going to be because I first received it. And if I'm not receiving it, then I don't need to bother even trying to give it.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, I have been guilty and I've been very transparent in some of these podcasts as a leader, both in the faith-based space and just in the secular world, is sacrificing that self-care. And I think a lot of times in ministry, Landon, and I know you've probably seen this, you almost think like you're being selfish. The old school of thought is I'm going to take care of everybody else. And then I'll take care of me last. And, you sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry. Yeah. Right. And so a lot of times, listen, if you're watching today, whatever space you're in, Landon is spitting some fire here. And he's telling you, you have to take care of yourself because you can't transfer to other people what you don't possess yourself. And I've heard it said this way, is that when a teacher refuses to learn or has stopped learning, then they've relinquished their right to teach. Right. Yeah. And that's really what you're saying in a lot of ways, is that we got to be learning. We got to be taking care of ourselves. We got to be growing. We got to mature and get better. I believe in getting better, even if it's just 1% every day. Let me ask you this in regards to living on purpose and living on mission. One of my catchphrases is, I believe we're made on purpose for a purpose. Sure. Through the lens that you have, what does that mean? Like if somebody's watching today, and I know we talked about the general call of God and all of that, but what does living on mission or living on purpose mean to Landon?
So it means that that we have to live in such a way where we're beginning with the end in mind. Another Stephen Covey thing. I just keep stealing his stuff here, I guess. But the idea is where do I want to be, and then what steps do I need to make to go the way. So I don't set priorities. I make decisions. So it's not these ethereal things like I want to be.
Sure.
And then to fall in love with the process. So here's a great way of looking at this of living on purpose. Is there's one way of saying I want to lose weight, and that's a goal oriented mindset. A process oriented mindset is I want to be the kind of person that eats right and exercises, and I'm just going to do it every day. And then the byproduct of losing the weight is going to come. Yeah. But if it's just about goals, and this is why I think sometimes goals can be not the best thing to aim for, because you reach the goal and then you've reached it and you've got to find a new goal to stay motivated.
Right.
But it's the process. Like, who am I becoming through the decisions that I make?
Sure.
The habits that I form. So for me, living on purpose is very much every Sunday evening, I sit down with my day timer and I list out my values, like the things that I believe in, the things that I believe that God's called me to be and to do. And then I make sure that my calendar and I go log into my banking app and I make sure that that my money, like that everything's lined up to the kind of person that I want to be. And I try to pre-make all those decisions, pre-make how I'm going to spend my time, make sure that I've got family time, because that I want to be the kind of person that leaves a legacy for my kids. So that goes first. And just too many of us live by default. Like we just kind of wake up and like let the day come to us.
Right.
But it is about prayerfully determining the kind of person that you want to be, and then begin to make decisions to become that kind of person.
Yeah, John Maxwell talks about when people interview him, he says, I don't make just regular goals. I make growth goals. Like, how can I grow and be a better person? And as a result of becoming a better person, those things are a byproduct. So I definitely love that. In regards to faith, I do want to speak some Christianese for a minute, because when you're a high achiever, D personality type person, and I've noticed that there's a struggle for many individuals like that to come to God. I believe it's because of it's a control thing, right? Pastor Matt Chandler from Texas says it this way, that we make really crappy gods, really horrible kings. In your experience as a pastor and just dealing with the different types of people, what have you seen has been one of the main barriers of people coming to faith in God?
Oh man, this is now we're talking, this is a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
I think the problem that we have in my context, still being mostly in the Bible Belt, is it's kind of hard to get saved if you don't know you're lost.
That's good.
And it's kind of hard to really sell out and become a disciple of Jesus whenever you've been surrounded by cultural Christianity. So when it comes, for me, the biggest thing that I see when people are not coming to God is because they've just been sold a vision of Christianity that's way too small. And it's like, I just need to be a decent person, show up to church on occasion, try to be as good as I can. And that's it. And that's such a barrier because, let me take to Isaiah 55 for a second. Don't have it in front of me, so I'm kind of paraphrasing.
Sure.
But Isaiah is speaking to the exiles in Israel, and he's giving them an invitation to come back to God. They've been in Babylon, to come back to God. And then he says, come to me, all you who are thirsty and you have no money, but come and buy wine and milk and be satisfied. Come eat and drink and live. So there's this category of people that are empty. They're thirsty. They have no money. I love the verbiage he uses where he says, buy wine and milk at no cost. So how can you buy it if there's no cost? And that is maybe a prefigure to the cross to show that, that it was already paid for us. And that's a whole thing time to get into. But there's this category of people that if you know you're thirsty, if you know you're broke, if you know you're hopeless, then the wine representing the joy of the Holy Spirit, the milk, the nourishment, you want that, right? But then and that's somewhat easy as a pastor whenever you meet people whose lives have fallen apart, they're broken, they're desperate, they know that they know that they can't save themselves, they need a savior. Like that part's somewhat straightforward. But then he also says, why would you spend your money on things that can't satisfy? Because most Israelites that were living in the Babylonian exile, most of them were impoverished and they were thirsty and they were broke. Those people had no problem coming back to the promised land to receive the good gifts of God.
Sure.
The problem was you had an aristocratic class. You had religious and political elites who were kind of living it up in Babylon. They had money and they had good food in Babylon. They had nice homes and they had a good life. They had favor, and they were so full of the bread of Babylon that there was no need to come back and enjoy the table that the Lord had set. I believe that the biggest barrier or obstacle that I face, it isn't people that are too empty, it's people that are too full. And whenever you're already full, you're full of yourself, you're full of life. Our political ideologies are competing with spirituality at an alarming rate. Politics is the new religion for many, many people, including many professing Christians. People just come in so full And so you're trying to say, hey, like, come to Jesus, really buy in to be his disciple and make it in.
Yeah.
And there's just not a felt need because we've gotten the cheap substitute.
And it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we're willing, and I'll put it in maybe a very layman's terms, that we're willing to settle for Sam's choice when God says, I have Coke, the real thing. Right. You know what I mean? I mean, I think about years ago when I was a kid, Coke changed its formula, and it caused a major uproar. They said it was going to be better than the original version of Coke. And I think sometimes our greatest adversary, obviously that's Satan. And there again, we're, stating the spiritual needs, Christian needs here for a second, but I believe it's important when it comes to leadership that I believe our greatest adversary changes the formula just a little bit, right? You know this as a pastor, that the greatest threat to the gospel is not agnosticism, atheism. And listen, if you're an agnostic or an atheist today, I love you. I'm not saying it to hate on you. I'm just sharing this to give a story, an analogy. Is not the greatest threat. A lot of people think it's these radical thinkers over here, but it's really that small variation of the simple gospel,
right?
That our greatest adversary throws out there to take us away from the simplicity of the gospel. So let me stay here just for a second. Two more questions, if I may, but this is kind of a one that I was thinking as you were talking. What is the simple gospel, right? Maybe somebody's out there watching going, Landon, I hear you loud and clear. I tried the church thing, and it's just not for me. Maybe they were sold, if you will, for lack of better words, a version of Christianity that just wasn't that simple, that was really more about morality and just being a good person. In your eyes, what is just the simple gospel?
In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul talks about the things that were taught and handed down to him. And of all the things that he could have said, he boiled it down to this, that Christ died, was buried, resurrected, and was seen. So Christ died for you. He was resurrected, defeating death on your behalf. But then the was seen part is what's important, is that he didn't do this in a vacuum. He did this so that he could be seen by you, by people. He was seen by the disciples. He was seen by the crowds. He appeared to Paul a little bit later on as well.
Sure.
But he wants to be seen by you.
That's
and if we boil it down to, there's a lot of debate, a lot of directions we can go. But you have to ask yourself a simple question, and that is, did Jesus resurrect from the dead? And if he did, then everything changes and you can trust him with your life. And that's such a great starting point, because many Christians, we do a great job of majoring on the minors, of taking ancillary or insignificant issues and elevating them to first order things. But it really is quite simple. And I would just say, like, this is what Jesus did. He knew that you weren't able to save yourself, and he died on your behalf. Yeah. And that's it. That's the simple gospel. There's no need to add a bunch of stuff to it. It's just that simple. He died, buried, resurrected, and he wants to be seen by you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Listen, I'm just going to stop right here and just tell somebody, quit being a crusty Christian. You know what I mean? Like, you can send me the hate email if you want to, that's fine. But quit being the crusty Christian that's always preaching what you're against and never talking about what you're for.
Yeah.
Right. That's what Landon's talking about, majoring in the minors. A lot of times Christians focus more on what they're against and never talk enough about what they're really for. Right. And so I definitely love that perspective. I always ask everybody that comes on the podcast as we get ready to wrap up here is, if there was one word you would use to describe Landon, what would that one word be?
Well, I listened to some of your other episodes and I knew this question was coming, so I've given it some thought. I talked to my wife about it, and she has some suggestions that I won't mention, but so it is, because it's hard to deduce it down to one word. But I like the word diligent. And just someone who stays in the moment, who works toward goals right now, but not so caught up in the future and what could be, but just committed to putting the work in and doing what I need to do right now. I do not feel like I'm the most gifted in any one area, but I have accomplished a few things, and I think it's just by discipline, focus, and the ability to just to work on it. And I think giftedness is slightly overrated, and
Sure.
we talk about it maybe a little too much.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of, very few of us will ever reach our full potential. And so many people wish they had more potential. They wish they had a higher ceiling, but bro, you're not even at the ceiling that you have now. So why does it matter? Here's the thing. There's the parable. Jesus, 1 talent, 2 talents, 5 talents, he gives them out. And then he comes back and he holds them accountable, but doesn't hold them accountable. Like, he didn't ask the 1 talent guy why he didn't have 5. What did you do with the 1? He didn't ask the 2 talent guy. And so this is maybe the least motivational part of the podcast today. You may be a 1 talent person. That might just be you. Like you may just be a 1-trick pony. Your ceiling may be lower than other people's ceilings, but God's not going to hold you responsible for why you're not as talented or as gifted or as accomplished as the next person. He's going to hold you accountable for what did you do with what you had, with what was in your hand. And so I've always approached life that way. And there are differing opinions on if I'm a 1 talent guy, 2 talent guy, 5 talent guy. I really believe that whatever's in my hand, I just want to do the best that I can with it. And stay focused that way.
No, and I totally agree. If you're watching this today, listen, don't spend your whole life chasing other people's talents or envying those talents and never cultivating, sharpening, honing in on that 1 talent and being a good steward of that and making an impact in the lives of other people through that 1 talent. So I definitely love that. Real quickly, as we wrap up, where can we find you online?
All the usual places, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Just look up Landon Galloway there. All my sermons, if people are interested, at grace.1. And then when you're there, you'll navigate and find the Tomball campus, and it's all there. So that's a great place to find me. Maybe one other place, destinyleaders.com, if about the Leadership Institute that I lead. But that's me.
Yeah. And if you take any of Landon's sermons, at least give him credit from the pulpit. Don't be that guy or that gal, right? No, real quickly, any last pieces of advice, maybe to a leader, aspiring leader that's watching today, just anything that's just stirring in your spirit as we get ready to close shop? Is there anything that you would just like to share as we close?
Well, we've covered a lot, but I would just reiterate, take care of yourself. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap, and don't get caught up in the rat race, the hustle, the desire to achieve. Don't focus on building a platform. Focus on becoming the right person, and God will give you a platform. Maybe that's a good way to end it.
No, I totally agree, man. I totally agree. Thank you so much, man. I was, like I said, excited about doing this with you. You brought a lot of value today, I believe, to our audience. And I know God's going to use it when this drops here soon. But listen, as we close today, I just want to remind you again that I truly believe that all of you were made on purpose and called for a purpose. And I pray something was said today will stir deeper than just service level motivation, but will divinely inspire you to reach out to your Creator and literally just say, God, my life is a blank check. Just whatever you want to do with my life, I'm ready to wave the white flag surrender today. And I'm ready to live on mission in such a way that first brings you glory while making an impact in the lives of other people. So I just want to say, God bless you guys. Make it an awesome day. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. Thanks.